Welcome to the first episode of the FincTank. Thanks for coming on. So I don't know if everyone will know you, but obviously we know each other quite well. Anyone who doesn't know Pesh, she is currently at Wise, where she's the compliance director of LATAM and MIA. And if you don't know her, you're a bit of a dork because she's quite well known in the sector. I have admired her from afar and close up, not like a stalker, but close up for a while now, because not only has she carved out a career that has been very intentional in the new space of financial crime, which we'll talk about in a minute, but also she is passionate about diversity and inclusion. And she set up, one of the co-founders of the Black Wises Network, which is, I cannot wait to hear more about that, which is a space for Black employees at Wise to thrive, which I love. So I do love you otherwise, but one of the main reasons that I wanted you on the podcast initially is because you've got the golden goose of a CV that I love. You have got FX, CFD, brokerage, FinTech, banking, literally everything. So initially, was that a conscious choice or did you kind of just go with the wind took you? How did it kind of come about?
Accidentally. Like every other compliance officer, none of us actually sets out to be compliance officers. We all surprisingly have a law background, as in at least 90% of the people I know in compliance. And so as I was doing my law degree, my master's, I needed money. So I tried to find a part-time job. And I stumbled on this job, like a fraud analyst, where it was like follow the money. And basically it was a call center. You would sit and you would ring people and be like, hi, are you in some random place in the world, because I can see there's activity on your card. And surprisingly, and I say this all the time, like if anybody who knows me knows I tell this story all the time, because it was quite eye-opening for me, because everybody thought I was a fraudster. Obviously, with my accent and ringing random people on their landlines or mobiles, be like, hello. Hi, I'm from the bank. And they're like, no, you're not. And so I tell this story with fondness because, it kind of made me sort of stumble into financial crime. But after that, I realized that, one, I never wanted to be a lawyer, or at least not the kind of lawyer that would go and sit in court. It's extremely boring, sorry, to all the lawyers out there. And I thought, you know what, I could do something more fun. So it would still be, following my passion and, reading regulations and some sort of law and working with some sort of law enforcement. But it would be a lot more fun to be follow the money. It's a whole new world in financial crime. Like it was one of those things like, oh my God, this career exists and I did not know about it. Like I could do so much here, like so much good, which was always what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a human rights lawyer. Yeah. So I always knew I wanted to do something good. And so I have stumbled my way across many companies, but I've been very intentional about the type of companies that I have worked for. Initially, in the beginning, that wasn't the case because I just needed money.
But that is how it is in your junior career. I think I'm yet to meet anyone, apart from maybe Elon Musk, because I know him. Not that I've met him.
You know Elon Musk?
Yeah. He's next.
Sorry for another day.
Who could shape their career that early on. I think it's really interesting that you came from a fraud background, because so often we see MLROs and heads of compliance and all those sorts of people coming in and they have not really had a lot of first-line experience and they've certainly not seen fraud at the coalface. When you were choosing the places that you wanted to go, it's true to say that you went to places that were a little bit smaller and a little bit more progressive. Is it because the organizations were flatter or you had a really great boss, or how did those opportunities come about?
Well, I think, so going back to I needed the money. So these were the companies willing to pay the kind of salary, basically, that, I wouldn't complain.
Girl gotta live.
And so, they were open, but more so is because there were more generalist positions. So like I said, starting off with fraud and realizing, oh my God, like FinCrime is, you could literally move from fraud to AML to sanctions. There is such a wide variety of specialisms that you could actually have, and going for these smaller companies allowed me to have sort of like my fingers in many different pies, so to speak. And so I got a really wide range of experiences and then narrowed it down to really do not like fraud. Because
sorry, fraud people.
Yeah, sorry, fraud people. And I'm not saying like nobody cares about fraud. Fraud feels most of the time like, almost a victimless crime sometimes because if you think about it, like if you ring your bank today and you go like, oh, I've been defrauded or someone's used my card, the bank literally just goes like, did you have your card with you? Yes. Where did you last use it? Blah, blah, blah. And then they're like, oh yeah, here's your money back.
Yes.
Right. So it kind of feels very impersonal in a way. Like there are some type of frauds that are very personal, like romance scam, which I feel are very particular type of way about, because those are very personal and play on people's emotions. But then with money laundering, which is where I really narrowed it down to be like, this is what I want to do. It was just so wide. There was just so many ways money could move, and the impact was a lot bigger than, I want to say than fraud, but like it was, for me, it felt like it would be the place where I would make the most impact. Because there were so many typologies to cover with money laundering. Absolutely. And there were so many things that I could do, and there were so many controls that I could put in place, and it would impact like so much of the landscape within the company in terms of like control. So going for these companies in the beginning, coming back to your question, was I did get to kind of experience it all and kind of really figure out where my passions lay. And because they were smaller, I also got to make, it sounds really selfish, but I also got to kind of like make an impact and also make a name for myself, because they were smaller. If you needed something, you go to Pesh. Pesh knows the answers. Because there weren't that many people. I wasn't just another number in the company. I was somebody who was sort of protecting the company, protecting the customers. And so therefore I got into these positions where if I went for the next job, I could say all the work that I had done, and that kind of like just helped me slowly get on the career ladder to where I am today. So
it is interesting you say that, because there are the two types of profiles that I typically, well, not anymore, but they were traditionally the two types of profiles, right? There was the big banking profiles, like the guys from HSBC and Barclays, who have got these like extraordinary experience in terms of working within these big matrix structures and the work that they're doing. And then I get the profiles like you guys, which are really hands-on, coalface kind of roles. And even now when I'm hiring for the two sides, they're like cousin markets. They don't always match up. You can't always place people across the way. But that actually brings us very nicely into my point about Wise. So you joined Wise kind of before it was Fetch, before everyone was joining it. So firstly, why didn't I get to place you? No, but how did you get the job? Like, how did you hear about it? Because the role that you've had has obviously shaped and grown as the company has grown. So it's a really good example of getting into somewhere where there is a ceiling for you to keep going for. Well, not ceiling, hopefully, but growth. How did you get the job?
So, interestingly, I was headhunted. So you failed on that point because you did not headhunt me. But I got headhunted, and I had a recruiter reach out, and they're like, oh, there's this new company, like they're looking for a compliance officer. And, and I was like, who? Never heard of them before, which was a surprise, because once I started looking into it, I was like, right. So I'm Kenyan, and therefore I would be the typical Wise customer at that point when it was TransferWise, because it would be remittances. And so I send money home all the time. I've got projects back home, I've got family support, blah, blah, blah. And so I'd never heard of them. And I was like, this is very bizarre. I've never heard of this. Like, of all the people who should have heard of them, it would be me. So out of curiosity, actually, at that point, I wasn't really looking for another job. And also, like, FinTech was, like you said, it wasn't really...
You can say Fetch.
Yeah, it wasn't Fetch, as you say. And so it was like, oh my God, this sounds like a failure. Like in my mind, because it's like, oh, as we all start out in compliance, now FinTech is like huge, and everybody wants. But it wasn't back in 2016.
No, it was risky, and it was seen. I remember, because guys, I don't know if everyone listening was hearing that. We're old, but those were the days coming from like the huge HSBC fines, and there was a lot of pressure, and anyone wanted to be working in these big banks and these big sexy projects, and so it was kind of the afterthought was the fintech market, really.
Exactly. Yeah. And so going in, I was like, you know what? They're down the road from where I was working at the time.
Convenient.
And so I was like, well, I'll do this over my lunch hour. Like, it's an hour. And I walked in, and the first thing I was like, what is this? Like, is this for real? Because there are people riding scooters in the office. So that was one. Up. And then the office had this really cool vibe. I'm like, this cannot be real. Like, obviously, please appreciate this for those people who are listening. When you have a corporate background and you go into a fintech office, it is completely different.
Were people wearing suits, or was it all?
No, nobody was wearing suits.
What did you wear to the interview? Were you like suited and booted?
So my lead at the time and the person who's really like helped me a lot in Wise, he's now left Wise. But he used to make fun of me because he used to say, "Oh, you walked in looking like Beyonce." Now, context here. I had really long hair.
Beautiful.
For those of you who are African and understand what I'm talking about. I had very long, straight, hair. I was working in the Square Mile, therefore I was in a pencil skirt and very high heels.
That's very 2016. How dare he judge you?
yeah, very. And he makes fun of me because he says, you walked in looking like Beyonce. And then I walked into the interview and there were two people in t-shirts and jeans. And I have never felt so out of place.
But what were you to do though? Like back in the day when this was pre-working from home, pre like cool kid vibes, everyone was like, I probably had the same pencil skirt. And like, those strappy little heels.
Exactly. So everybody who can picture that and who's old enough to kind of remember them days. So I walked in and I realized this was a very different environment to anything I'd ever seen, anywhere I'd ever worked. I liked the vibe. But most importantly, I liked the mission. Now, for context, I was in CFDs FX before. And I tell people this because I say, like, before that, I was in gambling. And in gambling in the industry, we know what gambling is. Like, you know, you can lose your money. People come in, like, wise-eyed open. You can, you know exactly what you're getting into. Whereas CFDs and FX, it is more...
sneaky gambling.
It is packaged as an investment. But, it is gambling.
It is gambling.
It is just packaged differently.
It's,
And I wasn't really comfortable with that. I didn't feel good when I went home. Like I didn't, fine, there was market manipulation in terms of like financial crime and all the other stuff. But it wasn't, I didn't feel like I was making an impact. Like I didn't feel like I could go home and be like, I love what I'm doing here. Because I just didn't feel the vibe of the industry.
We're going to talk about the vibe check soon because it sounds non-technical, but it's a very technical part of picking a job. Yeah.
Exactly.
And so what's Wise's mission? Is it still the same?
When I joined Wise, it was TransferWise, and we just had a remittance product. And basically it was making money, moving money, so borderless, eventually free, transparency, everything that I needed for the people who were closest to me. My final interview was with the CEO.
Were you scared?
Yeah. But the reason I bring him up is because he asked me, why do I want to join Wise? And I said, this is something that everybody I know that I love and care about is going to need and is going to use. And for me, I would be more than happy to work on this because this is something my community are going to benefit from. And therefore I'd be doing something good, but even something better because everybody could use this. It was transparent, there were no hidden fees, eventually they had the eventually free. It was going to be like sending money was going to be like sending an email. They're trying to expand and penetrate like lots of markets. I was like, I want to work here just purely for the mission, if nothing else. Like, the fin crime side, let's keep the bad guys out. But like fundamentally, I am feeling this mission. Like this is what I was put here to do, to kind of help my community, but also do something I love alongside that. So that's how I ended up at Wise.
And how big was it when you first joined? How many people?
I think in the London, we were about 120 in the London office.
How many now?
We are over 1,000 and something now.
Wild.
I think I'm employee number 700 and something, if I remember correctly. Or something along, I can't remember the exact number. And now we are over 6,000 employees at Wise.
And when you joined, so you were compliance officer, which is such an arbitrary title. No, it doesn't actually, it can mean something and nothing all the time. So what were you doing for them initially? And then how quickly did it you became the big dog?
Big dog. Oh, I am not the big dog. Never have been. But again, comes back to like, being a generalist. So they're like, we need a compliance officer. I'm like, great. Well, what does that mean? And they're like, go find a problem and fix it. And this is the thing with like this smaller fintechs and or just companies that are starting up is that you get to do everything.
Yes.
And so I got to go in and I looked across the entire control function. I was like, I think there are inefficiencies here and here. And so I decided to pick EDD. Believe it or not, I was like, I want to help the EDD
Most
team.
people are like, I can't see EDD, what?
Yeah, and I was like, that is what I want to do. I want to work with the enhanced due diligence team. I mean, I was working with everyone else, but I was focusing on that because that's where I felt like they needed the most.
But it's so important.
Exactly. I felt like they needed the most help. And so that was my focus for like a year. And at that point, there were 2 compliance people in the London office, myself and my lead. All the others were operations and they were out in our operational bases. But like quickly establishing like people could come to you and ask all sorts of questions. Again, I had experience across fraud, across AML, you know, across sanctions. And so it wasn't that difficult for me to provide advisory and also embed myself in certain teams to be able to kind of help them along. So EDD became my passion, and shout out to all people who are in Fastline. I do love Fastline.
No, we should love Fastline. I'm going to shout this out. Fastline have my heart. One, you guys get all the stick. And whenever there's a fine, it's something to do with Fastline, and it's never your fault.
It's never. I know.
And someone trying to cut corners. We can talk about EDD till the cows come home because it is like such a popular role at the moment, and it's moving into that 1.5 kind of role, isn't it, where people are doing proper enhanced due diligence, client on-site visits. So it's really cool that even in like the suited and booted days of 2016, you were looking at it. And when you were getting promoted, it will be probably quite pertinent at this time of year. A lot of people are talking about promotions and asking for promotions and thinking about it. And I try and articulate to people, it's not always up. You can go left, you can go right, you can go around, as long as you are growing and you're taking an interest in what you're doing. So the next role for you, what was that?
So the next role for me was actually deputy MLRO.
So you just decided to go, pew!
Very.
She's not looking around.
So kind of looking at this in 2 ways. One, like I said, there was 2 of us. One was the MLRO.
Don't highlight that. So my next role is deputy MLRO. That's all I'm going to say.
One was the MLRO. And so naturally I was the deputy.
No, guys, it was a hard interview process and she succeeded.
I say that lightly. But like there were other people obviously who joined there. But at that point, I had sort of established myself as the go-to sort of fin crime expert within the company. And my love for Fastline really sort of endeared me to the teams. Like they found it very easy to come to me with problems. I was able to work alongside them. Like I wasn't afraid of going back into the trenches. And this is something like a lot of people like at certain levels feel like, oh my God, I cannot review this customer. I can't do this. I will go to the trenches with the team. I will be there with them. We will solve these problems together. I just won't sit there and provide you with a nice advisory. Yeah, you could do this.
But how are you going to catch things? Like it's not just files, onboarding, anything like that coming up. It's, are the policies working? Are the procedures working? Are the sales team coming back to you with the information? And if that can really mountain out of a molehill if you don't catch it. And there are a lot of MLROs that I speak to, who I won't name, who look down on the first line.
Exactly.
And one, they've never had experience in it, which is wild when you think about the new structures of financial crime teams this year. And 2, they don't really understand the pain points or have gotten to know them. Just before we move on to how you became the big dog in your new role, I just wanted to go back to the interview with the CEO and the vibe check, because that's really important. So we do a lot of recruitment at FincTank, plug, recruitment company that I own, for fintechs and for startups in particular. And I call it the 50-50 rule. It is 50% skill set. So you have to be able to do the job, know the regs, love the regs like a little nerd like you, but also the vibe check. You have to be a really commercial type of MLRO, and you have to be or compliance officer or whatever level you're going into. Often they say, why do you want to join our business? And you need to know the business. And why do you want to join a startup? Because it's not just, oh, we're going to pass it over to the policy team. I don't know how to write policy. It's very hands-on. So how did you prepare for meeting the CEO?
The headhunter, the recruiter,
who we won't name.
We would name, but he's actually really
no, he's
good.
not. He's terrible.
Not as good as you, but he's really good. We keep in touch. But he sent me a bunch of YouTube videos, and he was like, "This is how the CEO speaks," and this is kind of like, and like a lot of like most founders are not. Most founders just they trying to find the right words.
Let me help you.
This.
Founders come from tech, product, or finance.
Exactly.
We're not going to say anymore.
Yeah. So you get that. And so preparing for that was strange because I was like, why am I watching YouTube? I don't know. Like for me, I'm just like, I'll just come and sit here and we vibe. Like that's just kind of like how I go with.
Yeah, but it's true.
And that's how I approach interviews. I'm just like, you've obviously seen my CV. You obviously know I've got the expertise. So you want to see if I'm a good cultural fit. And this is what I also tell people I interview. I'm just like, this is not an interview, it's a chat. Because you have to like me as much as I like you.
Well, absolutely. But when you meet the CEO as well, it's not a technical interview for a compliance professional. They are trusting, I hope, their team or their consultancy or their one really good recruiter named Jess from FincSelect to find them a good person. So when you're meeting the CEO, he wants to know, do you understand the mission? Do you really want to work there, and have you done your research? I think the video thing, begrudgingly, is a really good idea.
Yeah, it was, and it helped me. It helped me because I understood his style.
Yes.
People are very culturally different, and so some people are very direct, whereas some people like me are just like, So it really helped me to kind of like understand like the kind of person he was, and also understand just how passionate he was about the mission. That was really key for me because for my next role, I didn't want to do something that didn't make me go home and feel good about myself. No matter how much money it was, I wanted to be able to say, I'm doing good. Like I'm doing something good for the world. I'm doing something good for my community. I'm fighting financial crime, but alongside it, I am working for this company with a really cool mission that really aligns with my own values. And so just, preparing for that and seeing sort of all the interviews that he had with people, I could tell like he really was passionate about this mission. This wasn't just, and also it was the first company where they were like, we want to make this free. I'm like, how are you going to make money? Like in my mind. But I got there and I realized they were actually serious. They wanted to make this as painless as possible for everyone. Just preparing for that interview was key for me because the company had already passed the vibe check in the interview rounds. Yeah. Now I was meeting the person behind the mission. And I think for me that was important because he really brought it to life, what that meant.
Some people choose their workplaces for loads of different reasons. And as long as you've got, when someone asks you that question, they're not, very rarely are they asking you to wax lyrical about them as a person or anything. They want to understand that you really understand the niche that their business is filling and the risks surrounding that as well. Okay, can we talk about big dog roll?
Big dog roll.
So, pretend that I'm dumb, but I know a little bit about financial crime. Can you explain, just in case there's people listening who haven't got as much knowledge as you, exactly what you do right now?
So right now, I am the compliance director. What does that mean? I laugh when I say this because everyone was like, what does that mean? I'm like, I just help people along. Like I just help people just like figure it out. Like I've been the path they're walking, so I know exactly how to unblock them. I know how to, steer them in the right. I know how to challenge them. I know how to make them think differently. I know how to make them work with fast lines, so they're not butting heads all the time. I know how to speak to product. Basically, I'm a facilitator. In other words, is kind of how I would. But that is how it is.
And how big is your team then right now?
I look after LATAM and MIA, and at the LATAM we've got about 3 markets. So Brazil being one of the biggest markets. I know.
How interesting, right?
And then we've got Mexico and Chile. And then for MIA, I've got a couple of markets there as well. So in total, I've got about 6 or 7 live markets at the moment. Yeah. Before this role, I was the UK MLRO for Wise. Yes. And the compliance lead. And for Wise, this is our biggest market. The UK is our one of our biggest markets. And it got to a point, and I think, I remember when I got this role, I think in 2020, it was I got it just as we were told to go home for COVID. And I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, this is like deputy, I was fine. I mean, it wasn't going to come down on me. Like, it wasn't my neck on the line.
just chilling.
I was just like, not too bad. And then they're like, boom. And now you're there, Miller. And I'm like, sorry, what? And I panicked. I think I went into panic mode. And the first thing I was like, I need to dot every I and cross every T because I don't want to go to prison. Like I can't. I wouldn't survive. Like I can't survive prison.
I'm too precious.
I'm too precious. I can't. And so I think I went into like, how do I make this like the best fin crime control program that's ever been seen in the history? And I think I went overboard. Sorry, team. But it was a defining kind of 4 years having this role as MLRO, and a lot of sleepless nights and a lot of panic as well, because every small thing I'd think, oh my God, they're coming for me. Even though, in the course of business, like, mistakes happen.
I think they were busy in 2022 with a few other places.
Yeah, I'm just like, mistakes happen. As long as I can hold up my hands and say I'm fixing it. And as long as I understood it was all on me.
Yeah.
If something failed, it was on me. And so I leveraged quite a lot of the relationship that I'd built with Fastline. And to be honest, because those teams knew me and knew how I worked, and because I had been with in the trenches with them, and because I'd been working alongside them, I never once felt that they would do anything reckless, and they never did. And if something was broken, they would tell me immediately, and that relationship was really key in me sleeping at night.
But I mean, if we won't name the banks, it's not particularly fair, but there has been a fine recently where the first line were saying this isn't right, I don't know what's going on, I don't think we should be doing this, and their head of compliance, MLRO, or whoever it was making that decision, just didn't listen. Can we talk about becoming an MLRO from deputy then? Because did you have to speak to the regulator to get approved?
As soon as everything opened up, I had to obviously have the meetings with them in terms of like, tell us who you are, how did you get here, blah, blah, blah. I did have to go through the whole approval process. We were getting to the point where we were really massive now. We were key player, and so we were directly supervised, which meant that I had to have engagement sessions with the regulator. And that was why eye-opening. I think for me, one thing I always look back on is, the one thing that I feel like would be missing from the industry is like somebody helping you navigate those conversations, because as a new MLRO, as an MLRO anyway, you don't know how to prepare to meet with the regulator. But luckily we had a reg team at Wise who, shout out Katie, but she really helped us prepare, like, this is how you speak to the regulator. Yeah. This is never say anything that you cannot back up, never promise anything. Yeah. Don't say more than you need to say, and be open, be transparent, key on transparency, hold your hands up, be proactive. All of the people who are becoming MLROs and having to start these engagements, like, I wish they have someone who they can go to and like, my meeting is next week, I don't know what to say.
Because when you think it is the big dog role. Keep saying big dog, big cat, big mouse, big animal role.
It's a big mouse because you're terrified. You're being MLRO is absolutely terrified. Like, anybody
as it
who
should be, though,
tells you they're not terrified. You say, big dog, in the grand scheme of things, like, people look at you and they think, it's a great role, it's a senior role, but actually it is absolutely terrifying, because you are so scared of making mistakes, and mistakes will happen, but it's all on you. It's all on your head. And if you're not fortunate enough, like I was, to have like a really strong team around you, be it in first line, in third line, within your own second line team, it can be very, very difficult. And if you're working for a company with no compliance culture,
I was just about to say that I strongly suggest that startups don't hire someone who's not already a pre-registered SMS 17, because you just don't know what you don't know, and they need a sounding board. And if your sounding board in those smaller companies is the founder who really is just like, get stuff done, it's not the right person to sound off. And you're right, there's actually a bit of a interesting trend in the market where MLROs are leaving the industry. They don't want to be SMS 17, so we're trying to replace them with people moving into the sector. But of course, their deputies are not skilled enough to move into that role as a sole person. And the structures of financial crime are that they report into a head of compliance who may or may not have a financial crime background. More often than not, they're just a regulatory compliance person. Well, not just. Sorry, reg people.
Reg, the boring side of compliance.
Amen.
Sorry, reg.
Secretly. Not so secretly. Everyone knows that I love FinTech. And it is really challenging. I mean, you have these MLRO groups and things, but I mean, a lot of the smaller firms lean into consultancies. So they'll get like a like a FinTrial or a Thistle or an Advise or somewhere, those really cool smaller ones. Shout out to the boutique FinCrime firms that can help them along that journey. But it's a worry because you don't know. And particularly if that person who is coming in to be the head of compliance hasn't had a first-line background or hasn't had a framework background or has never spoken to the FCA before, it can be quite daunting. What would be your tips for anyone listening right now if they are about to or aiming to engage with the FCA for an MLR approval?
Top tip is maybe reach out to someone. If this is your first role, like before you even accept it, just really ask yourself, does this company have a compliance culture? And it's okay if they don't, if you will be given the tools and you'll be empowered enough to create that culture.
But how would you judge that? How would you test that in an interview?
So I always say this, like at the end of every interview, everybody gets asked this, like, do you have any questions for us? This is your chance to ask. And their answer will tell you a lot about, again, when I talk about the vibe check, this is what I'm talking about. Yeah. Does the culture fit? And it's not just about the culture in terms of like, are we vibing well? It's also like, from a compliance culture, how do you do this? If you have this kind of scenario, and give them a scenario, see how they would react. And don't be shy, because at the end of the day, it's your neck on the line. Yes, the company will, but it is you. It's your reputation. It's personal liability. So you've got to be asking the really hard questions when you get the chance, when you're interviewing for this. Have a look at their history. For the smaller firms, like the really start, ask yourself, you have no experience in second line. They're offering you an MLRO role. Can you, hand on heart, say you will be able to do this? And I don't think people ask these questions enough. Everybody that I know in FinCrime, or most people, aspire to be MLROs at one point. Like, I look back and I think, what was I thinking? Why would I have wanted this? Like, what? Not sure why.
It is a good job,
but it is a good job. But like, once you go through the motions, it is great. But like, ask yourself, like, you've been doing, fast line work, and now you're thrust into the second line. You've never provided advisory in your life. You're now expected to actually be the person who basically runs the compliance program here. Are you qualified? And I'm not saying don't take it. Yeah, of course, sure. If you're comfortable and you feel competent enough, then do. But be conscious of like where your capabilities lie and where you need to ask for help. Yeah. Soundboard your ideas with other MLROs. I think one thing, like, I have to say in our industry is that everybody is very open. Like, really, the FinCrime people, we stick together. And I don't think you could ever reach out to anyone and they wouldn't just give you 5 minutes of their time.
I mean, there's some mean ones.
They always will be some, but like majority of us, like when we hang out in like the industry events or the summer socials or whatever, like we are a good bunch. Like people are really genuinely willing to help, and that's because we all have a common goal. Like we all want to fight financial crime. We don't want any of us to get in trouble, because once you're in trouble, then all of us are under scrutiny, and we don't want that. We want to be,
Totally. And even like the stress levels of it, because I think we've all had a time in our career where we felt like we'd jumped too deep and we didn't know what we were doing. So actually on that, just anyone, I know a lot of MLROs, and if you want to reach out, I can facilitate an introduction to someone in a similar kind of company or something like that, because it is a lonely job, particularly if you're in a smaller function. Another segue that you just set up there really nicely for me is remuneration, which I know everyone gets funny talking about, but I think when you're also going for an MLRO role, if the salary is a great jump for you but still quite low, don't take it. An MLRO role should not be paying less than 120K for a very, very small low-risk firm. If you're going for anything less, if they're trying to pay you 75K, no, don't do it. And also when you're doing those kind of roles and you're going into a smaller organisation, I really implore you to meet the head of sales or head of commercial or someone in the sales team, because that is a vibe check. Yeah. If he looks at you like you're something on a shoe, it's not going to work, because it is a really strong relationship that you can build there. And going back to the advisory piece, they're the main people you're going to be advising. I think the challenge with any kind of business, but particularly in the smaller firms, but obviously within banking, sales teams have high targets. Yeah. They've got aggressive targets, particularly if they've had investment or they've had any reason. So they're just doing their job. They're trying to onboard clients, and they don't need someone quoting regulations at them. They need someone saying, hey, I don't think we can do it that way, do it this way. It's a business enablement mindset that will set you apart in those kind of conversations. If you don't mind, we don't need to talk about your remuneration specifically because that would be weird. But let's talk about packages, because the way that packages are structured in your sector are a little bit different to in traditional banking. You might get options or you might get shares. How did you go about wrapping your head around that initially? And did you advocate for yourself to get more of a shares balance, or how did it kind of work?
So that's one of my biggest, I don't want to call it regret, but like I didn't know enough about share options, for example, to be able to advocate. So had I known what I know now, I'd have probably said, no, too low. Could you meet me here or there? Because at that point, and you know, at that point, for example, Wise wasn't listed. We was, and so there were just share options were just.
To your credit, no one was asking about them.
Yeah, and I didn't know. I didn't know what.
Yeah,
they were. I didn't have really time to kind of figure it out. For me, at that point, they were just like, I'm not entirely sure this will ever be worth anything because nobody could have predicted, like, you know, how big we would get, like whether it would be listed or whatever. Like, so I never got to actually advocate for that. For me, it was at that point looking at the base salary, and Wise, for example, does not pay bonuses at all, whereas I'd come from corporate where every quarter we got bonuses, and so for me it was like, okay, how does this match up? But actually at that point, I just want to be honest and say, like, I didn't really care because I was so in tune with the mission. Yeah. And I was so almost desperate to leave FXCF because I just didn't feel good about it.
But also at your level, I think that's a really good point on the conversation. At that level that you went in, we need to remember you didn't go in as the MRO. Exactly. You weren't as a senior person. You didn't feel like you had a negotiating power. And it was 2016 when no one's asking about it. When people are talking about the packages now, when I'm negotiating with people, it's a balance, because some firms try and be a little bit crafty and offer huge share options package, which actually, guys, is monopoly money until they listed it. Exactly. It means absolutely nothing. And they lower the base salary based on, we're giving you all these options or we're giving you all these shares. It doesn't actually matter until it matters. So it's a hard thing to negotiate at times because you also don't know what other people are getting. You don't know what the benchmark is. It's not like a salary negotiation when you know 120K is what you're after. Yeah. So you can have flex on that. So it is about education and working with a really good recruiter named Jess. But, you know, I don't fault you. And a lot of the firms that we work with at the moment do offer share options, share bonuses. Like you're saying that you guys don't do cash bonuses. They do a share or an options bonus each year. I'm in two minds about it because I know when I was on a lower salary in London, I wanted the money. Yeah. And you need the money, right? Like, I know. So it's hard, and it is the factor of kind of moving in from FinTech and banking. And, you know, banking bonuses aren't guaranteed anyway.
Yeah, so. And I think recruiters like yourself, like could do. So some people come and you can see that this person has a great CV. And I tend to find, like, these conversations I have with a lot of women in the industry is that we don't tend to advocate. We don't actually even know how to negotiate, like, the packages, because sometimes it feels as if you should be grateful you're even getting the chance. And that's something that a lot of, like, you know, people within the industry just, I think we haven't really had the conversation on the pay gap between women in fin crime and men in fin crime.
I see it firsthand.
But you in recruitment, I suppose you can see that. And I guess when you're recruiting people, I think, you know, it would be helpful to go, like, actually, no, you're asking for way less. You're going to ask for this because this is the industry benchmark. And also having conversations with companies that are like, yeah, like, this is monopoly money. At the end of the day, you've got
it's not money in the pocket.
It's not money in the pocket. And some, you know, and people say, oh, but we've got great packages. So, for example, I make fun about this because they go like, oh, we've got great maternity packages. And I'm like, well, great, because I'm never going to use that because, you know, my kids are grown now. Like, but that's fantastic for everybody else who's coming in. But, like, what's the like for me?
Let's talk about salary and pissing people off. So as you probably know, I'm a strong advocate for salary transparency. So we don't advertise jobs without the salary on, and we turn down clients that ask that of us, because I think talking about sort of being able to advocate for yourself, if you cannot understand the parameters you're advocating within, how on earth are you going to negotiate? All the power is gone from you. And so I think it should be industry standard, but we don't send candidates current base salary. when we send their expected base salary, and it's in line with what the client's asking and within market rate. For three reasons, really. One, say you had been at, I don't know, HSBC for 10 years. You are not on market rate. So I cannot, if there used to be a policy in some banks where they'd only give you a nominal uplift. It was up to 10%. And they used to hide behind it. It would be consistent bribery. I'm like, come on. Two, if you are faced with any of the disability criteria that really impacts how your current base salary, gender, and particularly race has a really big factor in it. So those are really important to us that we kind of close that. But it's more in the room, isn't it? When you're advocating, feeling like you're coming from a position of power and things. Have you had an instance where you've had to push for a salary increase, and how did you do that?
So one of my weaknesses is I do not know how to negotiate for myself. I am working with a coach on this because it is sometimes and this comes back to me saying, like, sometimes we feel like we're so grateful to be there, and it took me a long time for this because often, and maybe this is a good segue maybe to talking about like my advocacy for having a lot more representation in the industry is I was often the only, talking about race, I was often the only visible Black person in the room within the industry or within the company.
Particularly in second line, I bet.
Particularly in second line. And actually in majority of the roles I've held, in some instances there wasn't any other Black employee in the in compliance at all. And I think that played a lot in how my ability to negotiate, because I always felt like, well, I never looked at it like, oh yeah, I deserve to be here because like I've worked my ass off to be here. Like I know my stuff. Like I always was like, A, are they just feeling like a diversity quota? Like, is that like one of the things? And then B is like, I am so grateful that you've given me this chance. Like, I don't want to piss you off by asking you for like.
But how hard is that to have the undercurrent of your negotiations? And there's these sayings like negotiate like a white man and things like that. And I think it is a really powerful tool because they just assume, and like in the age of D&I, I know this is a hot topic and it's a sensitive topic for everyone, but it has to be said. Like, so I recruit top to bottom, first line, second line, everything. It is the strangest phenomenon. We have almost the best KYC, transaction monitoring, sanction screening analysts come from African diaspora because they have a really good overview of it. They understand the risks, everything. They're so good. And then no one can get promoted into second line. And if they do, they're stuck into that 1.5 line. There are, of course, strong people but it kind of thins out and thins out and thins out. And I think this is a big made up stat, but there's probably 10 Black MLROs, if that.
I know 2. Yeah, myself and Lena.
Yeah.
And Lena.
We can run through the 10 now.
And that's like, and I think when we talk about like what are your most pivotal moments in your career, I was realizing, hang on, I deserve to be paid for my skills, because
when was that?
It isn't just by fluke. Something I'm working on.
But
even now.
How old were you when that was? Like, when was that?
I think that was maybe before I joined Wise and before I joined all the other companies. I worked at a company where we were just chatting with one of my colleagues, and he's a white male, and he's a dear friend as well. And we happened to talk about salary and normally people would never talk about salary. In fact, most organizations discourage
so
that
English.
Like, yeah. I don't know why or how it came up, and I realized he was getting nearly 20% more than I was. And I remember going to my boss and going, sorry, but what? We're doing the exact same.
I bet they got angry you spoke about salaries.
Yeah, and he literally, that's exactly what happened.
It's like a man being caught cheating or something. It's like, no, what? Yeah. I didn't do that. Why are you talking about that?
But they did raise it. But also, like, I can't sometimes you have got to be like, pull a card out of your back pocket and it's like, well, is it because I'm female? I have many cards in my pocket that I can pull if push comes to shove.
People get scared of it.
Because people get scared of it, and that's the only way you get hard, and that's really sad. Like you have.
I don't know though. Is it pulling a card, or is it putting them up to a mirror and saying, "Hello, here I am doing the same job. Can you not see me?"
Yeah.
I find it a struggle because it's not a talent problem.
It isn't.
There's a talent pool. I mean, we can have the conversation for days and days, but it does lean into like the COVID conversation. There are more senior females currently who have had promotions, moved jobs, and increased their salaries in the last since COVID in the history of me being recruiting. And it's because they're no longer grateful for having flexi working, or they're not beholden to a company that's letting them finish early. And I don't know what the catalyst is going to be for Black and minority candidates, because it needs to be something. There's no outward racism that we can see. Like it's not like clients say to me outrageous, crazy things, but having communities like the Black Wisers Network, it sometimes takes down the barriers to conversations, right? Like it has to be said. Do you remember this was years ago, Goldman Sachs banned business meetings on the golf course because it was too many white males doing deals and getting promotions and things. And there is still a little bit of that, right? Like there is still a little bit of like communities that Black candidates don't feel comfortable in or part of. It's not their safe space. So what do you do with the Black Wisers Network? Like how does it, what if I was to walk into Wise, how would I see it?
Well, Black Wisers Network, COVID taught us a lot of things, and a lot of things happened in 2020. And I think at that point, I think that was the point where it was very, very clear that aside from, FinCrime, we were failing. And you've spoken just about it a little bit in terms of like, this isn't a safe space for minorities, really. But I also kind of feel like part of it is on us because we don't do enough to educate the communities around us about the existence of a career in financial crime, for example. Yes. And then there's the other part where there are a lot of barriers to entry. And I remember when Black Lives Matter picked up and surprisingly, I think they looked around and they were like, oh shit, we do not have any Black people who can speak on FinCrime. There's only Pesh. and that was great though, because
given that the geographic locations of where they work and everything.
But we don't have that. And I'm not even just specifically talking about Wise. I'm also talking about the industry. Because I remember I did a talk in FinTrail for part of the FFE as part of like what can we do with our colleagues, and I realized you can rise in these sort of spaces with an accent or not, having been educated in Africa or not, or wherever else you've come from. Like there's that. And then I remember having a conversation as we were preparing for a talk, I think it was with the FFE, and I said, one of the barriers to entry is that certifications are really expensive.
Yes.
A lot of people are not going to be able to afford this, but actually it will affect a lot of the minorities as well, because they're the people who are least likely going to be able to afford to get certifications to get into FinCrime. And I said, how about you ask if we can have a scholarship? And so I think they went away and they asked ACAMS, and now we have a scholarship. And I was awesome. We now do scholarships for minorities. And that is, lifting like the barrier to entry. That's just one aspect of it.
And where would people find information on that? Because that is like actionable, actual, tangible work that
so if you go to the ACAMS website, every year they announce like, you can apply for this, and there are lots of judges there. I was a judge on the first cohort, and there are various other FinCrime professionals who judge on. But that was like something that organizations can do that is quite tangible. Like, hey, these barriers to entry on certifications, if you're offering like, ACAMS is very expensive, ICA is very expensive. We're talking about thousands.
Which, like, when you don't have money, that's like asking someone for $1 million.
Exactly.
Like, it's just, you can't ask your parents for that kind of money. I think the point you were talking about, like, even just understanding that this is a career path, there's a few things that I've seen that have been really effective. Like this is a recruitment thing, but we used to have inner city schools in London come into my old company and we would tell them about different careers in banking because they had literally never known anyone in banking, and let alone fin crime. Like, obviously it's out, we live and breathe it, but other people don't live and breathe it. And so if there is a way to access communities that just, their parents are blue collar, doing the work, and I'd never met anyone in banking before I came to the UK, and it was very eye-opening to me. So in the mentorship program, it's a real shame. There was a really cool mentorship program. I think it was in 2018 or 20, and I don't know where it went, but it was 100 Black interns, and it was.
Oh yes, it still happens.
Is it?
Yeah,
because I haven't seen it for so long.
Yeah, it's still on that. But even talking about mentorship, so right now I mentor in the Girls Network, and it's inner city London schools, and you get to speak to a lot of the inner city London schools have a lot of minority communities, and so we get to mentor girls between the ages of 14 and 16. And it's surprisingly when you get your mentee and they've never heard of this girl, and it always shocks me because I'm always like you're within about 5 or 10 miles of the square mile, like you could, the potential at your doorstep is so huge, but they've never had people in their communities who are able to tell them, hey, look, down the road, there's a whole career in finance, there's a whole career in financial crime, they've never had opportunity. And so I try to show them what life looks like. And even though it's at their doorstep, they're always so surprised, I didn't know this was
particularly women, men,
particularly women.
It's I don't know if everyone else is watching the adolescent show on, I think, but the Andrew Tates of the world, that is the model for men. They can go into banking, they can go into trading, they can go into CFDs, but women, we don't have a lot of representation in women in finance and banking and stuff. And actually, going back to financial crime, it has the highest representation of females in senior positions out of all positions in banking. That's my favorite fact. And it's not by coincidence. It's a really ethical, like you were talking about the mission. It's a really ethical space for women to be in, and that we are really good at it. We, as if I'm an Emma Rowe now. And
I mean, you know everything.
My dreams have come true. Now I know that I told you I was going to do this, but I've got 5 questions that I want to sort of ask you. And they're more questions that I just want to ask people because I can't ask you when we're talking professionally.
Right.
So, okay, my first question is, what was your best job?
If you ask me on a surface level, my best job, I'd say the job I've held at Wise has been my best job, only because I've been able to grow so much, and the experience that I have had there has been incredible. I've come from working in the trenches, as I like to call it, with the first line teams, and embedding myself there to holding the MLRO position and holding that down and really well. And then after that, I was like, I have done everything I can for you now. Give me something more challenging. And they're like, well, guys, LATAM, I do not speak the language in any of those. I can't speak Portuguese and I can't speak Spanish. And here is Mia, very widely varied, 2 continents, 6 markets. But it's allowed me to kind of really grow and thrive and cement my place as an SME. But if you ask me on a deeper level, I'd say my first job that really opened me to the fin crime is that job that I joke about in the call center, looking and analyzing fraud transactions and calling people, because I got to understand people on a different level. And this also, I had another lead at another company, and he once called me into his office and he went. He had Caribbean background, and he looked at me, and he used to have this corner office with glass in it, and he looked at me and said, look out there, and there were all these traders and stuff, and he went, you're gonna have to work twice as hard to get half as far as anybody out there, and I need you to understand that right now. And I was like, okay.
He's not wrong though.
He wasn't wrong,
sadly, but yeah,
until I came here, I hadn't realized that that was a thing I had to overcome. It hadn't. And I think it made me more determined, which is why that job was super important, because then I was like, it didn't matter how I sounded and it didn't matter how I looked. I could do this and I could make a change, and it didn't matter who stood in my way. I could just show them that, hey, actually, I am good at this.
Great at this.
And, I am, then maybe I wasn't so great, but now I'm just now I'm good at this and I'm great at this. And therefore, I deserve every opportunity that comes my way. And so I think that job really opened the doors to a whole new world, because then I'd be a lawyer, and I can only imagine
You would have been a very good lawyer. If I was in jail, I'd call you.
Maybe, but I would have been bored out of my mind.
No, you'd be getting me off my money laundering charges.
yeah, maybe. But then that's the thing. I wouldn't have probably been a white.
You'd be trying to convict me. You'd be like, no, she's evil.
I'd be just like, I'd be on the other side for sure. I'm not trying to get people off. But I think that job for me was like one of my favorite jobs because I have very many stories of like my time working in there, like how I would pronounce people's names and they would correct me, and I started learning, small quacks that have helped
English
me
names,
really
I'm
understand.
sorry.
I know, like there's this one customer whose name was Mr. Onion, but it spelled like an onion, and so I was like, "Good morning, Mr. Onion."
Oh.
Anyway. My name is Mr. Onion. I'm like, how the hell would I know
and
that?
Why did someone not write on the system some sort of like phonetic tip?
No, well, this is like back in the day, so that did not exist.
I do that. I write people how to spell people's names in our system because it's important to learn how to say them. But,
I know, it's important. But like, please understand, I'm fresh from Africa into England. I do not know that there are various phonetic ways of saying people's
names. Even now, and then with my Kiwi accent, don't even try and get me to say my own name. That sounds awful.
And I think like, I learned all of these things and I learned how to navigate like a very different landscape. So I think for me, that remains like my favorite.
It is like incredibly brave of you to move countries, start career. Like you don't probably give yourself enough credit for it. Like, I don't know many people I did it, but I didn't spoke I came from a very similar culture in New Zealand, like, so it wasn't that much of a jump for me.
Yeah.
Okay, let me go to my next question. What keeps you up at night? Don't tell me something too personal because someone will clip it and send it all over the internet.
Keeps me up. But do you know what? Now I'm sleeping a lot better. I'm not a Melaroo and therefore I have no personal liability. And so, what kept me up at night back then as a Melaroo would be like, in the last 4 years would be like, am I doing everything right? But now I think what keeps me up at night is just, I think for FinCrime in particular, I think there's a lot that is changing, particularly with like AI, and I'm worried for that because I was speaking to my kids. I've got teenagers. I know I look like one,
guys,
but
I know you can see her too. I know you can see her too. She's got teenagers.
Like, my kids keep going like, yeah, you look like you're a sister. Oh well. It's the melanin, but
I will not look like that when my kids are teenagers.
Yeah,
who's your nana?
But I can see like how financial crime is slowly penetrating into their world. With like sextortion, for example. We're having this conversation with them because a lot of them are on social media. You can't really take away their. I used to think like I'd be this parent where I'd be like, no phones and blah, blah, blah.
Aye.
And then they're like, well, my school works on my phone, so you can't take my phone because...
The parent you think you would be and the parent you are like a joke to it.
Exactly. And so just seeing how this is penetrating in their world in terms of like social media and how financial crime and money muling and how...
The country lines gangs.
Line and how this is penetrating to generations that we typically didn't see this a couple of years ago. Like before, money launderers were like,
They were like, I don't know.
Our age.
Yeah, young, 21-year-olds.
Yeah.
But it is interesting. I saw a TikTok, because I'm cool, of someone who was younger, and his whole algorithm, his whole feed was people with guns and wads of cash and cool cars and all this kind of stuff. It is literal brainwashing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that keeps me up at night because I'm like, how do we then build a world where we protect them from this because it's something that is so in their face and in their life. It's so ingrained in their life.
But they don't understand
technology is so ingrained in like whether you take the phone away and you give them a tablet, it doesn't matter. Whether you like they will find they will find
a way.
It is just so ingrained in their everyday life, whether they they need a phone to look at their homework or their schedules for school or whatever. Like you can't take technology away from them.
But there's the social ostracization as well. Like if you take a 15-year-old boy or girl's phone away, oh my God, they're a pariah. Yeah. Like, well, they know nothing, they're dead. There's the psychological impact of it as well.
Exactly.
But sorry, we're going to go off a complete tangent on this point. But there was years and years ago, you remember people doing the face recognition for KYC? Yeah. There was the risk of people just putting the phone up. They were paying them like 20 quid at the school gate because they didn't know any different. Saying, hi, say your name. Hi, I'm Jack. Yeah. And this is my account, getting the KYC, and they'd take the phone and go launder money through it. Yeah. So it is a bit scary.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of them, we're not doing a lot of education to this like younger generation about the risks of technology and how, this sort of perpetuates financial crime. Like we're so focused on like building the controls at a higher level. So like, we have money muling as transaction monitoring, as a typology and whatever. But actually, we're not going down to the grassroots to be like, hey, let's have some civic education on these children. Let's make these.
I agree. My third question is about FinCrime tech. Obviously, it's the talk of the town and what everyone's using. You and I were joking before the podcast about Actimize and how everyone used that. And that was really way forward back in the day. What's the best you've either used or would want to use?
So as compliance professionals, like I don't know whether they have the same conversations that I do, but like I've been at Wise for a long time, and with fintechs and startups and scale ups, we tend to build our own stuff because we think we're good at it.
You are good at it,
mainly. But as you go along, and I think as you are in second line or as you get into these positions where you start to have the conversations that is it better to build or buy, it becomes more apparent that you don't want your teams sort of reinventing the wheel. Like, the people whose bread and butter is, transaction monitoring.
Yes.
Go buy the stuff and customize it. Like, do you know what I mean? But anyway, these are conversations I have with like the product teams and stuff. And so, over the last 8 years, a lot of the stuff that I have used has been in-house. It's been something we've built together, something that, we say what we need and they go away and they build. Shout out to all the engineers and all the people who do the techie stuff. Like,
so cool.
I'm in awe of all of you. Same. Because it could never be me. I'd just spend the money.
But also, side note, that's a whole new career in FinCrime that's come in the last 2 years.
Yeah, literally. And so, like, for me, I'd be like, I'm a profitable company. I'm gonna buy stuff. I'm not gonna build. Yeah. But then that's also why I'm not the CEO of any company. But I think over the last couple of years, I think there's a lot of tech that has come through that I think, looking back, every time I get introduced to this kind of technology, I'm always like, I wish you existed like 4 or 5 years ago, because I'd have less gray hair because this is what I would use. And one of them, I think, Cable is great. So Natasha, I think is her name. So that's really good in terms of like risk assessment.
Tell everyone what Cable is.
So Cable is it's software that basically does like your risk assessments. And they've expanded to a lot of other things, but primarily when I saw what they were doing was, they could just do your risk assessments for you, and so you didn't have to do all of the manual work. But there are two that I'm super excited about right now, and one is called AVA. So that's ARVA, AI. Ooh, my God, look at us.
Very
we
hip.
are the cool kids now. We're talking about AI. And Ava sort of basically does business onboarding. Now, anybody who knows the pain of KYC, KYB, knows that it is a lot of manual work. And essentially what they do is that they can just troll through all of the documentation. They can read the articles of association. They can tell you who the shareholders are, and they can basically just pre-fill all the information for you. So it's super cool. They're a new kid on the block. I'm super excited about them because I think like they can solve all my problems. And then there's another newish one. They're called Cardamom, like the spice. Cardamom is a spice, right? Yeah, so they're spicy. And they do all of your regulatory mapping. So for those of us in second line who spend an insane amount of time reading regulations and line by line mapping them to obligations and then to controls, this does that for you.
That's awesome.
They just look at the type of license you have, the type of regulations, and they map them out. And they can even risk rate them for you if you give them your risk taxonomy. So I'm super excited about some of these startups that have the capability of having, AI like automate some of this stuff that we are doing. There are a couple of others out there. But like I say, we built a lot of our stuff in-house. So, like you said, Actimize back in the day, I can't even imagine. I don't even, does it still exist?
Probably like one of the big old clunky banks.
Nice, Actimize, well, yeah. But so there's a lot of like, I think AI is the way forward, and
people are so worried about it, right? But actually, diverging again, we are already seeing the impact of AI and efficiencies with tech. Not necessarily AI, but there have been mass redundancies. Like Santander just made a lot of their transaction monitoring team redundant. Crown Agents just made a lot of their transaction monitoring team redundant. So we're seeing first line roles kind of moving away from the more manual work and it's a shame. Well, it's more than a shame. It's heartbreaking because there's a lot of people out of work, and obviously I see a lot of that. But it goes back to the re-evolution of a fin crime professional in first line. Almost every first line professional that I'm hiring that is leading a team has to be able to talk to tech and product about the tuning, where it was so far from their remit before. Like I had never spoken about tuning tech product 5 years ago, and now like I'm so good at it. But it's if anyone is in that space and you're a little bit worried about where your career is going, I strongly recommend you start looking at SQL, or you start looking at Python, or you start just adding little sprinkles to your experience.
Exactly. And I think you're right. We just have to reinvent ourselves as compliance professionals. AI is here to stay. There's nothing we can do about that. So how best do we work alongside it? Like at the end of the day, it can't work in isolation. It's still gonna need some manual intervention or inputs, and so it's
coming for all of us. I met a recruiter the other day, the Judas, who had created a first stage interview that was AI. So you give her your criteria. Her name's Lisa, and then that AI person speaks to the candidate and then rates them based on the criteria. I don't know how I feel about it because there's so many nuances that you can find. But what I'm saying is, I think it's gonna automate a lot of the work that we're doing.
Yeah. Like I always tell people, this is the lay of the land. Like
good, the bad, the ugly.
This is the good and the bad. Like this is how it's going to be, and these are the pain points, and these are the challenges.
It's also the way I always am impressed with questions that people ask at the interview. Do you know how everyone always asks, do you have any concerns about me for starting this role? I think it's a dead question now because everyone asks it. A candidate of mine asked, he'll know who he is because he asked this and he told me about it this week, and I thought it was a really impressive question. He met the boss of the function and he asked her, what would you expect of me in the first 12 months and how would I impress you? And I thought, yes, because she'll reveal pain points for her, and in answering what will impress her, she'll probably invariably let a little secret out of what's not impressing her. They always go with opposites. Hey, this isn't what I've got. One more question for you. But is there any good questions that you can think of?
Ooh, I think from a compliance professional, I think the one thing I always say, like if particularly like you said, like you need, when you're interviewing, just make sure you get to meet the people who will cause you probably the most pain and the most headache. And this will be like product development, and this will be people in sales if you're working in a company in sales.
Right. This is my last question, and it is purely out of, I just want to know. So you came over from Kenya and you have siblings.
I do.
Where do you stack in your siblings? Are you oldest, youngest, or middle? That's the fifth question.
As everybody can probably guess, I am the oldest because I like order. I am like a boss. Like I'm like my siblings will ask, I'll be like, she is so strict. She's like if we do something wrong, like mom calls her. Like that's how.
So how many siblings do you have?
So I've got 3.
Okay.
And
boys or girls?
I've got 2 brothers and a sister. So very evenly distributed in terms of gender. But yeah, I'm the oldest. But also, fun fact, I am the smallest. So my siblings are a lot taller than me and a lot bigger than me. And so when I walk around them, I'm just like...
Yeah, but I reckon you make up with their personality and bossiness.
I guess, and that's why maybe my personality is just like, boom.
I'm the oldest.
I'm like, I am the oldest, even though I'm looking at you like this and,
Oh, isn't it weird though? I've got 4 brothers and they are all taller than me. And I remember distinctly being like, why? Why are you all so tall? I'm like 5'3".
Yeah, my brother came to visit the office this week, and
cool.
I introduced him to some of the team. And yesterday I went to the office, and one of them said, you have to tell me how you're from the same mother, because like you literally are like this small and he's like a giant. And I was like, yeah, kind of, I always joke with them that I was part of my parents' struggle.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's one final question for you. I've told you who the next guest is, but we're not going to reveal it just yet. Can you tell me one question you would like to ask this person? And I'll do it, whatever you ask.
Good. There's one question I always like to ask, and maybe it gives me a bit of insight into how people think about compliance. But could you ask him if he had a magic wand and he could get rid of one fin crime regulation, what would it be?
I thought you were going to say person. But...
And why? Yeah, also stroke person. Yeah. Like
that's a really good one.
What would it be?
Are you thinking that he might think one's redundant or one's just particularly painful?
I don't know. We'll find out.
We will find out.
It will tell us a lot about
the next
who he is.
episode. Thank you for that. Well, thank you so much for coming in.
Well,
I knew we would have
having
fun.
me.
And we'll see you next time.
Well, thanks a lot.
Bye.